Violence is our center. You would not be here if your ancestry did not fight as hard as they could to survive. It meant killing another animal or killing somebody else for resources. It's just survival. We have sequestered ourselves away from that. But at the same time, sometimes that pressure on the social ecosystem does make us react somewhat violently against each other, if not completely. Hey guys, welcome to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Tyler Weeb. We're going to dive into kind of an us versus them, let's explore polarization, friend or foe topic. Because I think not only are we deep in it now, and no matter when you hear this, I think we still will be for the foreseeable future. And Tyler, we've talked about this in many forms, but I think looking at it from a specific angle, as a person who wants to, I guess, feel included in communities. We have our fitness community, our bodybuilding community. We're kind of toward the academic side of that, where we work with a lot of general population clients and people who want just full life transformations, not only physical. And there is something right at the heart of social psychology that I just wish people understood. And it's this tension. It's so simple if you understand this. There's me and there's you. So now we have two people. I have wants and needs and desires and freedoms and responsibilities, and so do you. When we bring those together, they don't always match. So we have me, we have you. That means there's a relationship, and there's going to be some dynamic stuff there. It's not always great. We have to resolve conflict and so forth. Well, you add me, you, and a bunch of other yous. Now you have a society or a culture. Now you have a lot of people with potentially conflicting ideas and perspectives and thoughts and wants and needs. And so you ultimately have to create what we call a social contract, which, whether it's spoken or unspoken, it can be spoken in the form of laws and bylaws and rules and regulations, or it's just, hey, this is how we treat each other. If we don't vibe together anymore, then we just go find other friends or leave that community. But when that whole ecosystem starts feeling too much pressure and things start to break down, that's where you have real conflict. That's where you have war. And this is something that we get right from the beginning, right? Like, hey, little Johnny, you are a Klemczewski. Here's what we believe. Here's what those people believe. We're right, they're wrong. Then you go to school. It's like, hey, you're a tiger, they're a bobcat. Our school is better than their school. We're going to kick their asses on the basketball court Friday. And then it's our city versus another city. It's our state versus another state, country versus country, religion versus religion. And we just keep layering in these others, and it really starts to break down. So I'm curious, I don't know if you've thought of it in that kind of format, but when you see the polarization, you see the hate, even bodybuilding federation versus bodybuilding federation, natural versus enhanced. We just love to hate people. And there's something so naturally primal about that. But is it useful? Is it completely destructive? Is it a tool that we should know how to manage in different contexts? How do you just put all this together?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was running through like a few just, as you were talking, an idea here, an idea there. I'm like, oh, this, that. And when you kind of started getting into the use of like our language and how it can be so war focused and battle focused and hate focused, I was reminded of just earlier this week, Joe Biden was having his battle for the soul of America speech. And typically I think we see a lot of that language maybe from one other side a lot more. And then I'll all of a sudden to kind of see it on that side, my first initial reaction was, no, that's not how you're supposed to do it. But on the other side, well, sometimes we fight and fire with fire. But that's kind of what I was reminded of, and just how even so much of our language is dominated by this very aggressive idea of the battle for the soul, like so like grandiose and like life or death. I have to put my life on the line for the soul of this ideology that what I think America is, because these people think America is this. So that's what I was reminded of, and how I felt disappointed and sad that that is always the initial language that we seem to go to when we're comparing ourselves to, whomever, our opposite group or whatever.
Well, first of all, you landed right in the bullseye, which is this really is a need for self-protection. And it can be truly real in, you kind of put it in those terms of, battle and survival and so forth. But even if it's a little bit softer because our society isn't just out there, battling against each other for a meal, it still feels that way. Our amygdala is still set up to feel that much intent. And I was watching, I don't know if you've seen The Terminal List, an Amazon Prime series with Chris Pratt.
I
It's
have a
about
baby now. I don't have much time to watch TV.
Okay, well, this is the first series I've watched in months, and I couldn't stop because it's a Navy SEAL who bad shit happens. There's vengeance, and family gets murdered and all this stuff. Um, and I watched the conclusion last night, the finale, and it was so good, and yet my only thought was violence is our center. It just is, because you would not be here if your ancestry did not fight as hard as they could to survive. And that sometimes meant real violence. It meant killing another animal or killing somebody else for resources. It's just survival. We have sequestered ourselves away from that a lot, I think mostly. But at the same time, that's what I mean by sometimes that pressure on the social ecosystem does make us react, it's somewhat violently against each other, if not completely. And this is where you have to be able to talk yourself off that ledge. Is it useful for me to have this angry, compulsive reaction? Is it useful for me to not like that person when, if I think about it, I really don't even know them, or that organization, or that belief structure, or something? These are all self-protective because in our self, our ego, we talked about this, recently, we build these worldviews and these schemas. Then we categorize everything else as you're part of that or you're not, you're for me or against me. Then we start selectively processing the information according to all of our biases. We go through all these social comparisons, and pretty soon it's just a simple heuristic. You're good or bad. You're a threat or you're not. You're with me or you're against me. And again, I think it just takes, first of all, recognizing, why do I have so much animosity toward that thought or that person or that thing? And really start to analyze through the structure. Again, just knowing this is why my brain does this is the whole ball game.
Oh, it could take so much energy to hate that much too. Like, because I don't know about you. I mean, I've certainly have been like that in the past. And when you find yourself starting to like think about that particular group or whatever, you get yourself so riled up and aggressive, and like you start making up these scenarios in your head, and oh, they said this, and I'll say that, and you kind of go through that, and it just requires so much energy to to do that. And it doesn't go it or sorry it isn't going to benefit really anything or anyone, especially nowadays where, man, resources are so abundant, and that anger and that hate has to go somewhere. Like you said, like that pressure continues to build and build, and now that we're connected by a click away, we're starting to find, I think I said this last week, more and more of the type of people that are within our tribe, and now that pressure just continues to build as you find more and more, and you're just seeing like the cracks, right? And it kind of feels like it's almost accelerating to something.
Well, I agreed with where you started, and then I'm going to tell you where you went wrong.
Okay, thank you. You sound like Steph.
um, see, again, there's us versus them. I'm going to tell you
Yeah,
why I'm right and you're wrong.
that's okay.
So you are exactly right that it takes so much energy to hate. and it's mostly self-destructive, where I think most people would totally agree with you, because on the surface you're exactly right. Like, it's not useful, but it is useful. That's why we still have it in our psyche. It's useful because those self delusions protect me from having to be open minded and to consider that other people may be right and I may be wrong. And maybe I have all this sunk cost bias on how I've structured my entire belief system in life and family. And that's painful. Like, that can be like a psychic schism. And so we love to cocoon ourselves in these delusions and then just feel nice and warm and cozy. Everybody else is wrong. I'm right. Life goes on. I'll find the people who agree with me and we stay together in our little troop. The other thing that you said, and so first of all, let me say that people who are real high achievers, they absolutely have to have that enemy. They have to have the other to fight against, because that's what drives them. And so people who find themselves unmotivated, without a goal, you could say they're kind of type B or whatever. They need to construct something. It doesn't have to be like true hatred against somebody else, but they have to find something that creates some conflict that needs resolution. And it can be simply like, I want a better life. I'm going to increase my education or my work experience, and I want a different life, so therefore I have to go work for it. And that is the same thing, just not targeted toward a single person. But the other thing that you said is, man, why do we do this? Because resources are so abundant right now. And that's exactly why we're in the hyper polarized state we're in. Since 1980, 42 years ago, in the US, that was the height of the middle class. Now, the bottom 50% of our social structure is working twice as many hours to make the same money. Twice as many people are under the poverty line. The top 10% are making 200% more than they were doing the same jobs. The top 1% are making 400% more. The top 0.01% are making 700% more. So we have such pressure in the middle, and resources are getting so scarce. I mean, we still have half the world's population living on less than a couple dollars a day. We're just one catastrophe away from millions of people dying of starvation. 25,000 people still die of starvation every day. So that's where I think a lot of the pressure comes, because the kind of oligarchical complex keeps pulling more money to the top. And the new slavery is simply slave wages, where people are working harder and harder and harder, feeling less and less. So I mean, I don't want to talk about economics in this, but that's part of it. That's just a great prime example of, we could all be doing fine. We think everything's great, and then here comes this pressure. And then all of a sudden, people start fraying at the ends, and all kinds of conflict arises.
Yeah. And I mean, after saying that, you just kind of see it happening every single day. And I think that, maybe this is a little side note, but I think this is like a great example of kind of what we're talking about here today is, you can say that I'm wrong and I'm not going to get my backup. I'm going to go, oh, okay, maybe I am wrong. But there's that initial like embarrassment. There's that initial, oh, right?
I do that to you all the time. Just
I know. Well, it's because I'm wrong so much, apparently. I just kind of talk, and whatever happens. So but that's even still something that like I've been really working on as well. And I still think it is applicable to be able to take personal critique and feedback from people that is negative, but it is coming from a point of someone who actually does care and wants you to be better. Like, we have to still be good at doing that, because that is going to be such an important tool of being open to other viewpoints, things like that. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. Like, in podcast, calling me out, I'm wrong. I get my back up a little bit and go, no, you know what? Like, maybe I am wrong. Like, there's a good chance of that.
You can show this clip to your therapist and say, Joe pretends to be my friend, and then he's mean to me on camera. So
I got video evidence.
Well, so here's the thing, like talking about scarce source, or scarce source. That's a term. resource scarcity. Let's say 200 people go into a bodybuilding contest and only a couple pro cards are given away. Everybody's worked so hard for this. What happens after the contest? Oh, those fucking judges, that was political. They made a bad call. Oh, that team, that coach, that person, they did this. Like instantly, because we didn't get what we want and somebody else did, there seemed to be a social contract breach. The just world theory broke down. Like we must avenge our pride or our honor or get those resources back, even if it's a $15 trophy.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, there is, I think, yeah, certain positives to it where, maybe it can take that, that 15th place bodybuilder and give him that extra motivation he needs for the next 5 years. And he goes and gets his pro card and changes his life. Right. Or, you always hear about in professional sports that, the guy drafted in the Tom Brady, right? Last pick and, goes on to become one of the best quarterbacks of all time. And he uses that for whatever, how many years has it been? 20, 25 years he's been in the NFL, it seems like. So there is certainly those benefits to it. And yeah, I think when it becomes, manifested in a way that is, going to cause harm, that's when we obviously have to be careful.
Here's another way to use it as a useful tool. And I was talking to a friend of mine today about this. He's actually an organizational psychologist. And I brought up the topic of Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who is a neuroendocrinologist and a primatologist. He observed and worked with the same troop of baboons for something like 25 or 35 years. And throughout that time, there were many power changes. The alpha male, the sub beta male group under the alpha male, like people come and go, die. Sometimes an aggressive alpha male who's an asshole gets attacked and killed by other ones, and somebody else takes his place. And he was very careful to explain how the entire tone and tenor of the behavior of that troop was 100% malleable and different from generation to generation, simply because of the leadership that sets the tone. And so, as I was talking to my friend Zach, um, he said, "Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Like, I love sitting back in organizations or meetings or companies, and I'll see these schisms erupt. People on different sides of a conversation." And he said, "My goal is always to kind of bring people to the center." And I think just knowing that that's possible, that other people may not be as aware of these amygdala driven needs for threat perception and that hostility we naturally impulsively feel, and you can just bring people down because it comes from contact theory. Or just think of the whether it's that little kid that I talked about as a metaphor in the beginning, like you were born in this family, so you automatically, we're going to tell you that you hate those people. They have a different color skin than you, a different belief than you, so they're not like us. Well, you can do the opposite. You can get to know other people, and as soon as you start breaking those walls down through contact, you really start to realize that, man, I don't need that animosity and that negative energy in my life.
So there's a question based off of that. Then you could say that we nowadays, this is the most contact you could ever have with anybody, but it seems like we also have now the most animosity. So where, like, is it contact in a sense of like you have to physically be there and not behind a computer screen? Or is like, yeah, I don't know. That's what I was curious about.
It doesn't have to be that, but it does have to be some form of personal intimacy, some form of connection. Because yeah, you and I can hide behind a keyboard and snark at each other and tweet at each other and create more hate. But when you go offline for a second, like I've done this before, like where somebody says something publicly and I'm like, wow, that seemed aggressive or bad. And so I'll private message them and they're, oh man, you're right, I'm sorry, I got carried away and blah blah blah. And again, that's kind of my goal, right? Like you can just let things fester, or you can have contact, intimate contact with somebody. And man, I mean, that tension comes down instantly as soon as you're looking somebody eye to eye, even if not eye to eye.
Yeah, yeah, through a screen. Okay. Oh, that's yeah. And it comes back to the fact again of just us being open to asking questions, us being open to, other viewpoints, and trying to, understand someone else's viewpoint. There's definitely a lot of things in my life where it it doesn't come right away. Like it takes some thought, and it takes some playing with, and thinking about it abstractly, and working through. It's like, okay, like, trying to imagine, what that person is feeling or thinking, or trying to come at it from their perspective. And so, being able to do that, and still just take the time, and being maybe, hey, you know what, right now I don't agree with this, but let's maybe explore this a little bit and see where this takes me. Like there's nothing ever going to be wrong, because either A, you're going to find out, I mean, maybe you were right and maybe you shouldn't, and or B, maybe you were wrong and you learn a different perspective, grows the worldview, grows you as a human being, and away you go in a positive manner.
You just gave the perfect antidote, which is to disconnect and think. And that's another one of these societal pressures on the social ecosystem. And that's why social media has been so disruptive. Um, I mean, we used to, of course, we know, like we need to be in groups that we can feel are controllable. That's why the average primate troop is around 150 or so beings. Um, when social media hit, it was like throwing 8 billion rats in a shoebox. I mean that kind
Yeah.
of pressure where you can constantly feel assaulted is real, and it's destroying a large part of our youngest generation as we learn to socially evolve to deal with this. And what you just said, which is to say, hey, whoa, time out. Let me think about this. Let me put some actual concrete pins under this. Then that's what. But as soon as you're on screen, just going back and forth at each other or creating that hate and animosity, you're just going downhill fast.
Well, I also found too, it's like almost when you hate something, it's because you actually don't have a full understanding of it. You just have what your group has told you, and you don't necessarily have that full picture. And that was something too that uh has been a huge help to me, because just because I don't understand it, I have this like intrinsic, like, oh, like you try to shy away from it, right? Because it goes against maybe something that you're kind of semi, familiar with, like, and so then it can be a little bit scary to try and, figure this out and understand it. And as you kind of go through that process, it's like that feeling of tension almost starts to unravel as you go through that process, as you understand more. And you kind of then all of a sudden, like what I have just found for myself, is you kind of have like a light bulb moment, and all of a sudden it's just like this thought pops into your head, and you're like, oh, boom, and it kind of all clicks in place. And for myself, I just kind of find then, okay, the tension is gone. I kind of, well, at least on my understanding, this is how I understand it. This is what I think it is. And then, that's been my process, at least.
It's been one of the greatest things I've done, because I am somebody who's instantly distrusting, negative, de- de- defensive, I guess I should say. Everything to me is a threat. That's how I'm wired. And that's just a bad place to live. And I've had to go through a lot of this analysis and talk about being able to reduce anxiety in your life and worry, when you can just say, oh, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Let me think through this. Probably not meant to be an insult or this or that. But it does take a mental process. And I think that's the secret to using this as a tool, because I don't think we should go without that. I think we need to be skeptical and defensive when necessary, and maybe even offensive if necessary. But keep that powder dry until you really need it, and you're going to save yourself a lot of tension. The other side of this, that is entirely a whole nother podcast that we probably should do as a part two to this, is social constructionism, where instead of thinking that it's me against the world, let me create a whole team of allies. Let me be so useful and appropriately friendly with so many people that I never have a need to worry. That's why troops exist, because we are safer in those numbers. And it's because we've learned to retract some of our personal needs, wants, and desires, and be more amenable to others. That's how we create a close-knit community. We're much more forgiving of a close friend than an other. And so that's another big part of this picture.
Yeah. uh we talked about this last week. I kind of feel like it's applicable in this scenario too. And it was something along those lines. You said, like, you don't matter, right? Like you're nothing, but in a good way. And that's where we drive, all of this happiness, because of how, just in the cosmos and how small and insignificant we are. And I think it's kind of, you can apply it to this as well, right? In the terms of, how we think about others, and that, yeah, we are so insignificant. And so, yes, we can let certain tensions and hate drive us, but when it comes to community and thriving, being able to understand how much you don't matter in a good way is allowing you to then step back and go through this whole process we've been talking about today.
I should actually spin my camera around because I have one of my computers I have ported to a big screen over there. That's what I view most of the day. And right at the bottom of that screen, I have a button that I got at an event, and it simply says "Be kind." So when I'm looking at my work all day long, which is on a big computer screen, what I see at the bottom of that screen is "Be kind." And
A
that's
reminder.
there you go. Yeah, I mean that's just in every single interaction we have. If that's my default, is to just say, hey, let's inject some benefit of the doubt, some kindness here, and let's see where that takes us in this potential
Yeah.
conflict or relationship.
Yeah, my Steph would all like, one of her big sayings is fill the gap with trust, right? There's always this gap where we have that we do not give someone this benefit of the doubt. 99% of people, if they screw up, do something, they're not trying to. They're not doing it on purpose. They're probably having a bad day. They're not thinking. Fill that gap with trust that they're not doing this on purpose. And you can apply that into so many aspects, like a job, anything. Like, she has seen this so many times that, coming in the morning, closing, didn't do a great job. Someone would be pissed. And she's like, hey, maybe there was a dinner rush. Maybe there was this. Maybe you have no idea. So give that person the benefit of the doubt. Go talk to them. Hey, what happened? Like, how can we make this better? Boom, there you go. Now you have completely gotten rid of a situation that is going to escalate, piss people off, get people against each other, and create disharmony in a team, when they could have just, hey, maybe something happened. I'm going to go talk to them and see, if everything was okay.
Steph for the win. Why are you on this podcast? I need to
Right?
get Stephanie in here.
Hey, maybe we'll have to do a guest with her.
All right, man. Well, thank you, Tyler, for real. Really appreciate this. It's obviously one of my hobby horses. I love talking about social psychology, and hope you guys have learned something. Let us know, and any topics you want us to dip into, and we'll see you next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.